Hello, my name is Marisa Salisbury. I hope that you have enjoyed the Disease Forensics Facebook page so far. I've got another video blog here to do for you on a recommendation I have for a summer read for 2019. Before you get to that though, I just want to say I hope so far you've enjoyed the posts. You're more than welcome to make any suggestions of what to be on Disease Forensics, and I hope you also check out my Twitter account, which is Animal Nurse. Again, it covers a lot of the diseases, animals, people, and some environmental issues as well. My focus is on One Health. So One Health is the understanding that for an environment to be as healthy as possible, you need collaboration from three areas. You need it from veterinary medicine, human health, and environmental sciences. That the collaboration of those three can empower or encourage health within a community. So that's why you see animal health posts, human health posts, and some things about environmental issues. It could be climate change affecting issues with food insecurity or disease, or it's those three areas that I'm trying to cover. So today, for this video blog, I'm making a recommendation to you on a really good book to read for 2019, the summer of 2019. This book by David Quammen, called The Chimp and the River, How AIDS Emerged from an African Forest. And I have to tell you, this is wonderful. I borrowed this from the library myself, but I will be purchasing it and adding it to my collection because I can see rereading it again later and actually using some references and sources out of there at the future. I was incredibly impressed with David Quammen's, with this book. Now, I read another book by him called Spillover, that was also fantastic. Spillover discusses how diseases essentially spill over, as the name intends, from wildlife or rural areas into developed areas. That when we intermingle of wildlife, for instance, with agriculture or human activities of any kind, whether it's encroachment for making homes, that we increase the chances and likelihood for disease transmission. This book covers, though, is similar to it, but covers a very specific issue, HIV/AIDS. Okay, so before we go on to this for a moment, I just want to talk for a moment about public health, because it really is the basis for the book and the interest in reading this. So my life, I tend to look at things in a very public health kind of centered way. So not just with issues that pertain directly to, we'll say, disease transmission, but it could even be with politics. It could even be looking at community affairs. And what I mean by this is that cause and effect is not usually as simple as A causes B. It's not usually quite that simple, right? It's multiple variables that can intersect in different particular times, sometimes that we refer to as the perfect storm, and create bad consequences or really good consequences, or in some cases, it seems like the variables that go into it are more of a bane than what the end result is. Okay, but the point is everything converges and works together and produces something. Okay, if we look at things like that through a public health lens, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that too in a moment, then this may be even more interesting to you when you're talking about the origin of AIDS, the origin of HIV/AIDS. So a couple years ago, I was a substitute teacher, and I stepped in for a social studies class. And the teacher and I, before I started this particular day, he met with me in the morning to discuss with me what his junior high students were going to be working on. And it was a project that they had to come up as a big project at the end of the year, where he'd have to come up with, students would have to come up something that they were going to work on within a community. So they had to see a need for something, and discuss what they would do to meet that need. So whether it's homelessness, maybe it was drug addiction, something that was within that community that would actually, that they felt like they needed to work on. Well, this particular class, we were to watch a documentary about Joseph Kony and then discuss it. Okay, so if you're not familiar with who Joseph Kony is, I don't think they've caught him. So I'm going to use the word is here, present tense. He's a warlord that's in Central Africa, and he was making child soldiers. And there was an American philanthropist, social rights gentleman that really crusaded against doing something about Joseph Kony. It was around 2010, give or take a few years. I remember watching him myself on the Today Show when he had spoke. And the reason why this guy is such a bad dude, to put it rather bluntly here, was because he was making child soldiers. So he would go into these areas and sometimes kill the family, take the children, or have the children kill the family, and making these little soldiers out of these kids. Now, he was able to get away with this. He was fluid in and out of different countries in the Central African continent, and it was because some people would look the other way when he was there. Why would they do that? Okay, well, hold that thought for a moment. So we watched this documentary, and at the very end of the documentary, we had a discussion time with the class, the different classes, and one of the very first class that watched us, student had said, well, they would, as the United States, we could just take them out. So in other words, he's referring to a sniper. We'll just send in our armed forces and we'll remove Coney one way or the other. So I said, okay, let's run with that for a minute. Let's say we did do that. Let's say we went in there, we took them out. Would that really solve the problem? So we went back to examples from the video. So we brought up different issues, such as there is a tremendous amount of wealth in different African countries, and it comes in the form of natural resources like diamonds. Unfortunately, that wealth is not being given in some cases to the people of that country or that area. So you have very poor, they're not able to feed themselves or take care of medical issues or concerns and so on. So when you have people like Coney, Joseph Coney, that are doing awful things, but they're paying people in ways to keep their silence, then those things are able to flourish or maintain, right? So in other words, if you go in and remove him, you wouldn't solve the problem. You're just taking away the person. And you're essentially creating a void or means for someone else to step in. We saw this with Al-Qaeda, that in areas where they flourished tend to be areas where they provided protection to people, or food, or education to some, or provided medical care. So they go into these areas, these people like that, go into areas that are disadvantaged, and they take advantage of people that are in need. And they provide them with things where they're not going anywhere else. You know, this is essentially why the United States is so involved in different areas, by us assisting in providing aid, whether it's food or whether it's medical care, whether it's building homes in different areas that are outside of the United States, or schools. We're helping to create stability and leveling out that huge chasm between the very wealthy, sometimes it's the government, but the very wealthy in these countries, and the very, very poor, which lessens the likelihood of people being taken advantage of, terrorist organizations, or in this case, people like Joseph Coney. So if we're looking at it multifaceted, then we're talking about like a public health view of things. Understanding it's usually not as simple as A and B. The A causes B. No, there's usually a lot of variables involved. So let's talk about HIV/AIDS for a minute. If we today talked about every single person either practiced abstinence or safe sex, every single person that was a drug user either stopped using drugs or never shared another needle or drug paraphernalia. If every single person, every single mother that had HIV did not transmit it to their child during birth, if every single blood bank did not provide or have any risk of accidentally having HIV in any transfusions. If we got rid of all that, which is what we tend to hear a lot of, more than anything, right? If we got rid of all that, you still would not wipe out the disease. Why? Because those are not the origins of the disease. So there's that public health thing. It still would not get rid of HIV/AIDS off this planet because we're still not addressing where it came from. This is a good book that talks about that. So I've read a lot of studies. Okay, so I have some bunch of studies here, examples of ones that I've read. So I have one, which this is a big one in his book. This is a big one by Sharp and Hahn. Okay, so the evolution of HIV and origin of AIDS. I have one here about origins of HIV and AIDS epidemic. patterns of bushmeat hunting and perception of disease risk among Central African communities, chimpanzee reservoirs of pandemic and non-pandemic HIV-1, the evolution of HIV, inferences using phylogenetics, unintended consequences of bushmeat ban in West Africa during the 2013-16 Ebola virus epidemic, because we have other diseases that come from handling or eating bushmeat. Ebola is one of them. So if we're not talking about the origin, and the origin is believed to be from the area around Cameroon, from a species of chimpanzee called troglodyte. And no, I did not stutter. That is the name, troglodyte. That came from some sort of interaction, probably between a hunter and this non-human primate, who the primate was carrying SIV, or simian immunodeficiency virus, and the rest is history. Okay, so by trying to gain an understanding of the origin of the disease, we can work out possibly getting rid of it, right? You know, when we talk about poaching, for instance, we only really tend to talk about, well, we don't want to wipe these animals off the face of the planet. When we talk about encroachment, you know, when we're talking about urban areas, urban sprawl, or the overdevelopment or development of rainforests, we tend to talk about, well, we just don't want to wipe these areas off the face of the planet, which is true. I mean, I'm definitely not going to argue against that point. But the issue we don't talk about enough are what diseases the animals that carry, and they could even be carrying them in a way that doesn't affect them, or affects them very little. But when they come in contact with us, it's a different story. So it's understanding a multifaceted issue like with poaching, and what it has the potential to do with us when those diseases interact with us. In this case, simian immunodeficiency virus, or SIV, causing HIV in people. Okay, so I want to read to you this little excerpt, and it's very brief here, but this gives you an idea of how much in this 139-page book, how much it's covered. In The Chimp and the River, I trace backward to that moment of origin, reconstruct it, and then follow its consequences forward again along the pathways of social history, epidemiology, and glorious accident to the point when AIDS suddenly emerged as a global human disaster. Okay, and that's page 12 of David Quammen's book, The Chimp and the River. He does a wonderful job, and I'm always impressed. I was real impressed with Spillover too, because he takes you through this timeline that is fantastic. Anybody can follow, and you're able to apply it to other areas. So, who would I recommend to read this book? You're in veterinary medicine, human medicine, public health sector, yes. If you're someone looking for a good book to read, this is a good book for you, because it also talks about how culturally, how it can affect disease transmission, like with HIV/AIDS. This is a wonderful book. I hope this summer for 2019 you make it your book to read. Again, David Quammen, The Chimp and the River. Thank you, guys. And don't forget, you can also put your comments right down there if you'd like to say anything, or add your own recommendation for any public health books that you think others would really enjoy reading. Well, have a wonderful evening. I hope you enjoyed sitting outside this time to post this video blog or record a video blog, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye.